Hey, welcome to the Wildes cast. I would say my greatest joy and privilege in being an outreach rabbi are the people I meet. I absolutely love my students and the incredibly curious, smart, motivated young Jewish professionals who come to MJE. And it's really what keeps me in the game all these years. It certainly isn't the fundraising or the other things I have to do to keep this place afloat. Not that I hate that, but it's really my interactions with students. And every once in a while, there's a special student. I love all my students, of course. If you're listening to this and you're my student, please don't feel dissed. But, every once in a while, there's that special student that comes in and it just clicks. I'm a human being, so rabbis are people too, and I try to be nice and have, to everyone and have relationships with as many people as possible. But there's chemistry. And I just felt from the moment that Daniel Wallach walked in on that Saturday morning, he showed up on a Saturday morning, and he said that he was looking for more meaning and purpose in his life, and he wanted to know, what does it really mean to be a Jew? So he went on Amazon, he got my book, and he read the book Friday night, and he showed up Saturday morning to the service about 15 minutes early, and he said, "Rabbi, I read your book last night. I'm here to learn more. Teach me." He literally said those words. And I've been friends with Daniel Wallach for the last 3+ years since that fateful Saturday morning. He went off to Israel to study. After studying at MJE for about a year and a half, he went off to Israel to study in yeshiva, in a wonderful yeshiva called Machon Yaakov, and we stayed in touch. We got together when I came to Israel. We kept learning on the phone, Zooming each other, and he's a person that I just love to converse with and to learn from. There's a very important passage in the Ethics of Our Fathers that more from all of my teachers, I've learned more from my students, and I've learned a great deal from Daniel Wallach. But we spoke about a couple of important issues. Number one, how to stay religiously and spiritually connected when you're not in a spiritually conducive environment. Right? Daniel was off in Israel in yeshiva, and just being in Israel, forget yeshiva, can be such a satisfying religious, spiritual place to be. And coming to New York is great on many levels, but it could be challenging spiritually. So I thought that was a very important topic we discussed that could be relevant for a lot of our listeners. Also, the fear of people misunderstanding Judaism by teaching Kabbalah. Daniel has become very intrigued, as I have, by the writings of Kabbalah and Chassidut. And he wants to know why it's not being taught more. Why are we not engaging in this more esoteric, mystical tradition if it's so attractive and there's so many young people interested in it? How come most Jews get like the classic rational kind of Judaism? Where's the mysticism? We spoke about that. And of course, he wanted to know, what is really our goal, or any outreach rabbi's goal? Is it to quote unquote proselytize and convert? Am I okay with people who come to MJE who don't seem to move religiously? They're just like being here, they're learning, but they're not becoming more religious. Do I view that as some kind of failure because they're, coming, but they don't seem to be changing? And is that my ultimate end goal for everyone who comes here? So tune in, take a listen to a teacher with a student, and sometimes it gets a little complicated who the teacher, who the student is. But welcome to the Wildes cast. And here's my dear friend and student, Daniel Wallach.
Rabbi, are you ready to dig in?
I'm ready, man.
Are you ready to take risks?
This is it, man.
Are you ready to embrace curiosity?
I've been dreading this for a long time.
Are you ready to lose your entire donor base?
My donor base? All right, if this is what intellectual curiosity means, what am I willing to give up for it?
It's all out on the table, Rabbi.
Whatever is necessary to help you get to the next place in your spiritual life.
Good luck. We're going to be here for 10 hours.
All right.
And then some. Rabbi, it might be helpful to share with your audience who exactly I am.
So just for those of you, I don't know how it's possible for someone to have lived under a rock for so long that they wouldn't know who you are, Daniel Wallach. But just in case, Daniel is from Palo Alto, California, He is a professional actor. He teaches acting, and someone I'm proud to call a friend and a student. Showed up at MGE a couple of years ago on a Saturday morning after having read my book and said, Rabbi, I'm here to learn more. And that's been our relationship. Daniel also went and spent the last 2 years studying in a wonderful institution of Torah, a Torah learning center in Israel, in Jerusalem, called Machon Yaakov. Did amazing learning and spiritual growth in Jerusalem at Machon Yaakov, and it's really an honor and pleasure to know you.
That's very kind. So you're admitting that I am MJE's star student.
I'm willing to take that responsibility.
Okay, excellent. Now, it's true, I did wander into MGE one day in a couple years ago, completely lost, curious about one question that was guiding me in my life: what does it mean to be Jewish? And I came to MGE. I'd never seen a mechitza in my life. I barely knew you were an Orthodox rabbi, and the truth is, I came to MGE that day. We spoke during Kiddush, and I gave you a little 3-second zip of why I was there, how I got there that day. I even brought a lunch that day because I didn't understand the concept of Kiddush.
You brought your own food, really?
Yeah, I had food.
Because you weren't trusting of the kashrut.
No, I didn't know that it was a thing to have a little food afterwards, but it didn't matter.
I mean, that really demonstrates how far you were from Torah if you didn't realize that Jews would be eating after they prayed.
And we spoke very briefly. You locked into Kiruv mode. And you brought me to your beautiful home that Shabbos afternoon. I was dead tired because I was up till about 4 a.m. I finished your book and then showed up, at 9 o'clock, a couple hours later. And I was sitting there at the table and I was looking around, and the truth is that I was watching you. I was watching you at the table, and I was getting this very strong sense that this was a very, very happy man, surrounded by his beautiful family, and then a table of students and friends in an environment of learning and growth together. And it was an alarming moment. Again, dead tired, but I was in the zone at that lunch. And I write pages every day. I write 3 pages a day, and I wrote this down in my pages that evening. That I thought that this was a very happy man, and I wrote down in my pages that evening that I thought that this would be my mentor, which is exactly what happened. We continued learning over the course of a couple of years. And then you kicked me in the tuchus and sent me off to Israel for 2 years.
I missed you. I'm exceedingly, incredibly proud of you, Daniel. I can't even look at you as I say that, but yeah. I really am.
I did not pay him to say that. So that is the short story for how we got together. So I thought a lot about how we should start a conversation.
Yeah.
And in the biblical and Talmudic tradition, I want you to help me out with one of my dreams. Okay, so a couple nights ago, I wrote this down the next morning in my pages. I had a dream. I was in New York City, and it was torrential rain. The streets were rivers of water, literally up to your knees or up to your stomach, rivers of water flowing through the streets. And this was a completely normal thing to people. I mean, there was very few people outside because it was raining, but it was a normal thing for people to be wading through these rivers of water. And it was murky and cold, and I was barely able to step forward, mortified of this flooding. And then I started to push forward, and I started to say the Shema. I said the opening paragraph of the Shema, pushing through these waters. And for some reason, I don't know what it was. It was like I need to hit the mark on this idea of the soul right now. I need to get to that point in the Shema, and that was it. So, in the biblical and Talmudic tradition, Rabbi, help me with my dream.
You want me to interpret your dream?
Yeah, I want you to interpret my dream. I want to know what you make of it.
I don't really have the prophetic interpretive dream powers of Joseph. Wading through the water, if I had to just conjecture, this is all it is conjecture. That's all I can give you. Waters, there is a midrash that talks about what Abraham went through when he had to carry out the biblical command, the divine command to take his beloved son. And there's a midrash that teaches that the Satan, the spiritual negative forces through all this water to keep him from getting to where he felt he needed to go. So it could be that, you want to push forward in your life. You want to be connected to God. You're saying the Shema, but there are things that are keeping you from that. And that it could very well be that you, that those struggles and wading through those waters. And by the way, the fact that everyone around sees this as normal could be that this is the way you are. This is the way you were raised. You were living. What's normal for you is for all of this Jewish stuff, for all of this spirituality, for the Shema, if you will, to be, that's abnormal. What's normal is the water, is the stuff that's keeping you from getting to your spiritual destination, your relationship with Hashem. I can think of no greater symbol, than the Shema, and no greater symbol of an obstacle, perhaps, than the water. Although a different rabbi could interpret the water as being the actual goal. You understand? Because water represents Torah also. But, the idea of you're wading through the waters to be able to say the Shema. You can
but
go
not torrential.
Torrential, right. It seems like these are waters, like Noach kind of waters, like, flood waters. Not good waters. Not like spiritual wellspring Torah waters. But a water that you have to kind of push through in order to get to your goal. But it's curious that everyone around is looking at the water as normal. Because what that says to me is, and this is a big issue, is that a typical person who comes to MJE, and I hate to throw you into this typical person.
Are you saying that I'm typical?
You're not typical, but you're somewhat typical in this regard of someone who comes to MJE, and that is that what we're doing here is really not the norm, and that the way most people live in our society is the norm, even if it feels like in a dream, because now you're a different type of person, perhaps, that's really what's sort of keeping you from getting to where you want to get in life. I don't know. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, that does. Just for your audience, I just came back from yeshiva, just came back. And it does resonate for me. Those were some of the ideas that I was cycling through when I woke up the other day. Especially coming back to the States and this feeling that, even the frum world here, they're connected, but they're not as connected as at least my experience in Israel. Mm-hmm. They're attached, but there's more of a relationship with with what attracts the secular world here today, with materialism, with focus on things that are day to day, and not much, larger. And all those things exist in the frum world here, in my experience, for sure. But
the frum world, by the way, is the Orthodox world, I guess you were referring to.
Yeah.
But is that because you were in yeshiva, do you think you would have felt that difference if you, let's say, were a regular working stiff living in Jerusalem, getting up and going to work every day? Or is because you were surrounded by, when you're in yeshiva...
Rabbi, are you accusing me of flipping out?
No, I mean, well, you did flip out a bit. A little, in a good way. But do you think that do you think that's because you were in, when you're in that environment? I met some of your friends and colleagues and teachers at the yeshiva. It's a very lovely, supportive group.
Yeah. And
they're all out for the same thing, which is a deeper relationship with God and with the Jewish people and Torah. So, do you think because you came back and the people you're hanging out with now in America are not in yeshiva? Like, let's say you went up to Yeshiva University, you went to some yeshiva, would it be more similar to the experience you had in Israel, or is it no? It's Jerusalem versus New York.
I think that it's probably the case that I was in a yeshiva environment surrounded by people focused in that period of time in their lives on nurturing their relationship with God. And to be pulled from that environment so immediately and forcefully was difficult. And in that period of time, I would have noticed things that I did and cared about them more than if I was working in Yerushalayim. Even so, I still think that there is a level of spiritual connection in that world. Rabbi, you're a passionate Zionist. You're a passionate religious Zionist. At least that's how you've described yourself. It's on the record now. So my guess is that this kind of idea would make sense to you.
Yeah, even if you weren't in yeshiva, I would argue from a purely Torah/Zionist perspective, religious Zionism, the Talmud says, Avira da'aretz machkim. The avir, which is the air, in the land is machkim, is conducive. Now, we know it means spiritually conducive. It doesn't say conducive for what. But the implication is that there's something in Israel. People feel this, not just at the wall. That there's something that really pulls us, that connects us to our ancestors, our history, our Torah, God. Harder to feel it. And you might be feeling that now, coming back from your experience. A little spiritual withdrawals, if you will.
But this is something that you've been focusing on as well in a different way. I mean, so, Rabbi, we have to get it right out in the open here. Mm-hmm. You are breaking the hearts of your rebbeim. You're both alive and no longer here. You have turned your focus. Hold on, let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
You've turned your focus. You are completely becoming Chassidish here. You're sitting down, you're learning, and you're teaching the Tanya, which we have on the table for anyone who's listening.
Just happens to be
on the table, and you're growingly curious about a more ecstatic relationship with the divine, with God, with that which is larger than us, with the soul. More ecstatic, more emotional, perhaps, than what you were raised with. So why are you breaking your rebbeim's heart, Rabbi?
I don't know. Would I be... I mean, I guess I am breaking maybe my grandfather's of blessed memory. He considered my father's father, Harry Wildes of blessed memory, was a proud misnaged, which means he belonged to this group of people that were very much opposed, from the Hebrew word neged, against, the Chassidim. And, but, I mean, I'll tell you why I've taken a deeper dive into Kabbalah and Chassidus. It's not because I don't view my life before studying Kabbalah and Chassidus to be, what was the word you used? Ecstatic.
Ecstatic.
What's the opposite of ecstatic?
Rote? No, I'm sorry. Wait,
mundane,
no, I'm sorry. I I don't want to hit anyone down who does not connect with Hasidish.
Right.
I don't want to call anyone who doesn't relate to Hashem in these very emotional ways. They relate to Hashem in other kinds of emotional ways. They relate to Hashem through deep connection with the Gemara. It's meaningful. It's passionate. It's different. It's different things going on in the mind. It's different things going on in the soul. I don't want to hit anyone down who takes a more, should we say, Rabbi Penny says rationalist.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think that's the right word, rational versus mystical, because I don't think it's a good characterization to say I'm going from more intellectual to more emotional.
Okay.
That my more rational approach to Judaism, my more Maimonidean, if you will, focused on the medieval Jewish rationalists.
And you do like the Rambam.
I love the Rambam, and if you look at most of the books that happen to be right here, like Sajagon and the Rambam and Kreskisk and some of the other great Jewish philosophers,
Rabbi, I remember you at the Rambam shul the Rambam's kever in Yerushalayim, because when we got there, I was on the MGE trip. Rabbi Wildes bullied me into it a couple of years ago, and we were there, and you were just like, oh, we're here at the Rambam shul. We're here at the Rambam kever. I'm so excited.
I was very exciting. I mean, the Rambam was, but you have to understand, like the Tanya here, which is the writings of Kabbalah and Chassidut, quote the Rambam a crazy amount. And I don't view, and I'm not switching over from the rational to the mystical. I'm just adding on to it, really. But, and that's the book that I'm writing, this Basic Judaism book. It's all coming out in the book because for so many years I was steeped in the rational approach to Judaism, and therefore I didn't really investigate so much the more esoteric, mystical teachings. And now I'm doing it. It's creating a lot of complications in the book. We can come back to the book. But so it's not because I didn't have an ecstatic, emotionally charged spiritual life before. It's that it was that without the mystical. And I'm looking for a little more of a deeper / mystical explanation for human existence and for our reality than I think the more medieval Jewish rationalists like the Rambam and Kreskisk had to offer. So I don't view it as going from intellectual to emotional. A lot of people look at like Hasidim, they know how to dance nicely, but they're not like the real Talmudic scholars. It's not really true. A lot of these Hasidic scholars, first of all, they're most of them are great Talmud scholars too. But even when they weren't lighter intellectually. They were just different intellectually. Yeah. They were immersed in a different approach to Torah, which emphasizes the more mystical and esoteric. But as my teacher, Rabbi Grimblett of blessed memory, used to say, Kabbalah is an intellectual system onto its own. So it's not like, I had enough of all that heady intellectual stuff. I'd rather just, eat cholent, drink schnapps, and dance.
Which is great, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, But I will say there's a little of a warmth to it. And I don't even know how to put it. There is just something about studying Tanya and having some schnapps, drinking some scotch and making a l'chaim. There is some warmth to it somehow.
But
yeah,
Rabbi, you're cutting yourself short. You've been getting deep into it. I was in your office space in I don't know, maybe a month ago. You were away, so I was staying in for Shabbos. I picked up one of the tiny books on your desk.
In my home.
Yeah.
Oh, in my office space. In my home.
Broke in. Yeah,
you broke in. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I picked up one of your Tanya books. There was notes on every single page. There was underlines on here and there. You've clearly been digging in deeply into this. So my question is, with all of this study, how has this been affecting you on a day-to-day basis?
So first of all, the digging in, I have to give my oldest son a lot of credit for this, Yosef. He became very much enchanted with Kabbalah probably when he was about 18 or 19, and he's been studying it. He's 25 now, and he's been studying it pretty seriously for the last bunch of years. And he got me into it. And we studied Tanya together. We've been studying probably 3 or 4 years. And it's changed. I just find it it's answering some questions that I've always had about God and about Judaism. It's answering them differently than I've been used to, sort of the answers and the answers I've been giving my students all the years. And I want to give my students more, and I want to grow. I'm 55. I've been doing this for a while, you know. My Torah can't stay the same, because then I'll stay the same. And by definition, I'll just burn out. And I don't just mean burn out as a teacher, as a, MGE director. I mean, I'll burn out in terms of my relationship with Hashem. I need it to be deeper. And I'm not trying to imply that the Torah my teachers gave me and that I'm bringing great dismay to, was not deep.
We said breaking their hearts.
Breaking their hearts, yeah. Excuse me. I'm not trying to imply that, they failed, but most of them were not steeped in this kind of wisdom themselves. Now, here's the good news. The teacher of teachers, of all my teachers, and you know who that is.
The Rav.
The Rav, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. Even though so much of his writings and what he's known for is the more rational, he was, first of all, an existentialist in his outlook. And if you look at existentialism, it's very much connected to certain aspects of Kabbalah and Chassidut, which is interesting. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on epistemology on the writings of Hermann Cohen, who was a great German Jewish philosopher. And the most important thing about the Rav was he had this Melamed, he had this Chabad rabbi who would sneak in Tanya when he was supposed to be teaching him Talmud. This is a crazy story about it.
So what you're saying is the Rav was breaking his Rebbeim's hearts too.
His father and his grandfather. You know the story? The story is Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. Now, if anybody knows who Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, he revolutionized Talmud study in Eastern Europe. He was hands down the greatest Talmudic scholar in Eastern Europe. That was Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik's grandfather. Okay, he comes and he gives a faher. Faher is like a Yiddish word for he starts testing his grandson, who he knows is a prodigy and is brilliant. He's a little boy. He starts testing him on all the Talmud that he was supposed to have been taught. And he's not getting the answers right. And he realizes something else is going on here, because what was happening? His Melamed, his teacher, was teaching Tanya instead of Talmud. And he told his son, who was Rabbi Soloveitchik's father, no more of these tutors. You're teaching him yourself from now on. And his primary teacher for the next 10 years of his life, at least 10 years, was his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. And they went through Masechtas. They went through tractates of the Talmud together. So embedded within Rabbi Soloveitchik's psyche and his brilliant mind was Tanya and Chassidus and Kabbalah. So when he later expounded upon Jewish philosophy, it came out. It was there. But it's interesting because people don't associate him with that kind of approach, because his family, the Soloveitchiks, were referred to and are referred to this day as the Great Briskers of Brisk, which was a city which was a town in Poland known for its great misnagdim, anti-Hasidic rabbis, who were all about Talmud and rationalism and not into all that sort of mysticism stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It seems that there is a tradition of sorts of tampering down the spirit of those who are interested in that kind of stuff. I believe the same happened to the Ramchal, who was a passionate Kabbalist, but to my understanding, and I totally could be getting the history wrong, that he dealt with other Rebbeim who, I don't know, some of his books were lost.
Yeah. So the Ramchal, Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author of the numerous pivotal works of Jewish philosophy, was a real Kabbalist. But he made a deal that he would not reveal some of the Kabbalah. You have to understand there was a lot of skepticism and negativity surrounding Kabbalah, because when certain rabbis began to sort of reveal it, and we believe Kabbalah is as old as Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, my thought here is every Rebbeim's worst nightmare is someone takes on learning Kabbalah and winds up on the streets of Sfat.
There are worse things. My son spends a lot of time in Sfat. In fact, 3 of my 4 kids are going to be there for Shabbat this coming weekend. Because my son Yehuda, who's turning 20, asked, what would you like for your 20th birthday present?
Yeah.
He said, I'd like to spend Shabbos in Sfat. So we booked a Airbnb for my daughter, Abigail, for Yehuda, and for Yosef in Sfat for this coming weekend, please God. Anyway, what were we just talking about? Oh, so the Ramchal.
Yeah.
So the Ramchal, he claims that he had a visit from an angel. And the angel revealed this Kabbalah to him. Now, you have to know the history. What was going on at this time was the Shabtai Tzvi Messianic false Messiah situation. Wreaked terrible, terrible havoc in the Jewish community. And a lot of Jews were turned off from Judaism. And when rabbis start hearing other rabbis espousing Kabbalah, it seems to smack of this charismatic leader with this new kind of wisdom. It's not a new wisdom, and they knew that, but they were very, very nervous that people would be taking it, or they would take it in the wrong way. Now, if you ask Penny, if Penny was sitting here, one of my dearest friends, colleague here, has been on the MJ staff for 16 years, he doesn't deny the importance and significance of Kabbalah. He's just nervous that if it gets into the wrong hands, and who's the wrong hands? People not learn it.
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned to you, I listened to the whole conversation that MJE had recently. It wasn't really a debate; it was a discussion between the quote unquote rationalist perspective and the Kabbalist perspective, at least in relating to God. How do we understand God? How do we relate to God? Anyway, I left the conversation almost upset. It seemed to me that look, people are trying to connect with something larger than themselves today, whether people know it or whether they don't know it. Everyone has this instinct to reach out, to grab something, bigger than themselves, because at a certain age in people's lives, they realize that it's, the world doesn't revolve around them, which for some people is a scary thing. And
but what were you upset about?
I didn't know what Rabbi Penny was offering and how somebody should relate to Hashem if it's not through this, this understanding of Hashem that he's inside of you, right. He's outside of you, and you can connect with him, so deeply because your soul is an aspect of him. It's not him, but it's an aspect of him.
So he believes, like he would say, and he did say, that our souls reflect, we're creating God's image. What does that mean? That just like God can reason, we can reason, we reflect certain aspects of God, but there's not a part of us that is God or is an expressive of God.
Right.
And so that is a little more of and I do believe that if you believe that, as Penny does, and I did for many, many years, then your relationship with God, I'm not saying necessarily, but will often be more
boring.
Distant.
Boring. Just say it, Rabbi.
Why is it boring? Why is it boring?
It's because look, this is what I dealt with in yeshiva, and I've mentioned this to you a number of times. Building a relationship with the halacha is an incredibly important and at times exciting thing, especially I think for young men who in today's world are seeking responsibility, who connect with responsibility. And it's so important to integrate halacha into Jewish law into oneself, and to build a relationship with the commandments. because they build character, because they build relationship with Hashem. But if it's just a relationship and a learning with the rules, this is my experience. This is I'm not saying this to judge anyone else. This is just me. If it's just a relationship with the halacha, then it can hold. I think a relationship with the halacha can hold, but I think it's beauty that sustains, and without digging through the underbelly of halacha and the underbelly of our relationship with Hashem, which I think right now is most accessible through the Kabbalistic teachings, then your access to that beauty, that colors
is limited.
That colors your world. That colors, your walk to work. That colors, that colors, the words in your davening, in your Gemara learning, in the Sefarim you're reading. Without that beauty, I don't know if for most young people today that this relationship with their Yiddishkeit will sustain. It may hold for some time.
Do you think there's something about today that's different than, let's say, 100 years?
Yes, I do, because people's attention spans are so short. This is happening in the theater. They've been cutting intermissions,
right?
And making shows 2 hours long because they're worried about people walking out, in intermission, or they're worried,
And what, this grabs people more? This grabs people quicker, faster than let's say the more rational, because somebody else might be. That's why I do teach both in my classes.
Yeah.
Because anytime if I walk into a room and there are 20 students there's going to be a group of students that are more rationally oriented and want logical, rational explanations for things, not mystical and esoteric.
Right. Many students want that, and I've met them at MJE. I've been in class with them. I've certainly been in class with them in yeshiva, and I love them very much.
Right.
And I am not judging their relationship with Hashem.
But to you, it seems less exciting.
To me,
you use the word boring.
Yes, I use the word boring for I imagine most people who may one day walk through the doors of MJE. Because in other religious traditions, this is one of the reasons why so many Jews are run off to Buddhism. They run off to Buddhism. Some of them run off to Catholicism.
Right.
They run off to other traditions that are, so, at least on the surface, beautiful at entry point. And when I say beauty, I don't just mean an aesthetic beauty. I mean in all surround sound beauty.
I understand.
And fully encompassing, enveloping beauty that I personally have experienced, in the tiniest moments of my own, even in learning Gemara.
No, I think it needs. I literally just had this conversation with my son, who's in yeshiva in Israel. My son, who's 19, who spends most of his day studying Talmud, and he likes it, and he's good at it. He's a bright kid, and he's been well schooled in it.
Yeah.
So he's got the skills, but he feels that there's something missing. He does. Now, what we used to fill up with that something missing is that we would study Chumash. We would study Psukim, verses from the Torah and the Parsha of the week and the stories. And we would study some other great works of Jewish philosophy, and we would get we would get a deeper understanding of the whys behind Judaism.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a Kabbalistic explanation. What's different today that we're seeing is that the Kabbalistic explanation is something people are seeking out. Not everybody likes it. It doesn't resonate with everyone.
Sure.
Listen, I teach a Tanya class. I get a very nice group, but I don't get a lot of people because I think the ideas are a little, not beyond them. It just doesn't resonate with everybody.
Right. I think, obviously I think that our tradition is so, incredibly expansive that, there is a place for everyone in Torah. There is that flavor of connecting more deeply with someone's Yiddishkeit. It may not be learning Gemara. It may not be studying and growing in Kabbalah. It may be something completely different that exists.
Well, that's really, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's really what is missing today. I have there's an old buddy of mine, Rabbi Nadi Helfgott, who said to me that if you went into a classic yeshiva and you looked at the pictures of the sages on the wall, you would see all great Talmudic sages. Contemporary rabbis, from Rabbi Soloveitchik, from Moshe Feinstein, all these, you wouldn't really see, he said, a Baal Musar, someone who's known as like a great, ethicist, like Rabbi Yisrael Misalant, like you studied. You wouldn't see necessarily a Tanakh expert, like an expert on biblical studies, from a Torah perspective. You wouldn't see a Baal Machshava, and someone who's more of a philosopher. And that's changed a lot, I would say, in the last 30 years. I see the curriculums, because I put 4 kids through, Jewish day school and seminaries, yeshivot in Israel. And you see that yeshivot in Israel cannot get away with just studying and teaching Talmud anymore. They just,
because the generations have changed?
The generation has changed. I think that the language today in 21st century is more aligned with spirituality and Kabbalah. I'm saying the language just in general, just the secular vocabulary on some level. On the other hand, people are still looking for authenticity. How do I know that this is true?
Yeah.
And most of the faculties that we're used to dealing with to ascertain the truthfulness of something is logical reason.
Right. This was another thing that came up for me in listening to that conversation with Rabbi Bortz and Rabbi Pinney, was, it was screaming in my mind, there is precedent for the Kabbalah. There is precedent for the Hasidic teaching. Why? Because most of the Orthodox world is Hasidic. Is that not true? Most of the Hasidic, the Haredi world.
I don't know about the numbers. It's very large. But here's what there isn't precedent. There is precedent of popularizing it.
Okay.
That's really what the debate is.
Yeah, sure. If you're getting into things like the Kabbalah Center, where where it's you're getting diluted Kabbalistic teachings that aren't for just profit.
I'm not going to disagree, but I will say, though, that's really where Pinney's argument, and it's a good one, I still disagree with it, is that you teach somebody astrophysics who never studied algebra.
Yeah.
They're going to misunderstand it. And therefore, if you teach Kabbalah without people's belly being filled with the meat and potatoes of Judaism, then there's a risk of misunderstanding. What was Daniel Bortz's response?
Remind me.
His response was, there is such a danger.
Yeah.
There is such a danger, but
again, winding up on the streets of Sfat, with a hookah, with a blunt, as the kids say.
But everything in life, he said, is a cost-benefit analysis. And what's the bigger danger? Is that we don't have interested students at all. We just have people whose Judaism is so blah, and so dry, and so lacking in meaning and inspiration that they don't come to the table anymore. They become the 5th child at the Seder, so to speak. We got four of them. The proverbial 5th child, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, but it's, and that's the concern. And I thought it was a great answer, which was like acknowledging that there is a danger in teaching Kabbalah to people that are less than learned.
Yeah.
So, but the greater danger is that if you don't engage people Jewishly, they're going to leave the fold. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're seeing today a lot. Now, I'm not saying this is the whole reason people leaving the fold. I think the biggest reason people leave the fold is because they were never in the fold.
Yeah.
And they were just never educated at all. I don't, unfortunately, consider most of our Hebrew school, after school, 2-3 days a week, a real Jewish education, such that a person could say, well, I've considered Judaism. I've given it.
That's when I finished my first year in yeshiva, this was my thing. I was shocked and mortified and amazed at just beginning to understand everything I don't know. Like I was starting to know, I was starting to at least come to knowing what I don't know. And what I don't know would take lifetimes of learning.
And by the way, before you went to yeshiva, before you went to study and spent all day studying Torah, did you know that you didn't know?
No.
Right.
No, I didn't know. I didn't know. What did I know? What did I know? I was a pitcher. I was a pitcher.
Right. This is why it's so fascinating, because you only realize how little you know. Not you, all of us.
It's okay.
No, when I was 18,
I'm a self-proclaimed idiot, Rabbi.
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, maybe self-proclaimed.
Self-proclaimed.
You know, when I was 18, I was sitting in the back seat of my rabbi, and he was with his Rebbitzin at the time, and I had just spent the entire year learning, and he said to me, "This is my Rabbi Shalom Be Well, Rav Aaron Bino. He has a very high voice. He speaks like this. He says, Mark, are you ready to go back?" And I said, because he knew I was leaving in a couple of days, and I said, "Rabbi, I have to tell you, I'm very upset." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You know, I don't feel like I know enough to go back to college now." And he let me finish, and I said, "Before I came to yeshiva, you know, went to 12 years of Jewish day school, knew it all. I thought I knew everything. Now that I've spent an entire year of just studying and just learning all day, I realize how little I know." And he turned back to me and he said, "Now you can go back." Yeah. That was my goal.
No, I think it's a difficult thing sometimes to think back onto the environment that I grew up in, and to think about all the people who don't have a relationship with their Jewishness. To think, I know some people who they know they're Jewish, like it's an afterthought, like it's just like they happen to know, like they say, "Oh yeah, my mother's mother was Jewish."
Growing up, let me ask you, Daniel. Growing up, what was your when at those moments when you would ponder your own Jewish identity? What was running through your mind?
Stick it in the back of my mind, in a box, and focus on other things that were catching my attention at the time. Look, I grew up in the theater. I grew up in what felt like and what feels like a spiritual expression. To there was nothing like being in the moment on the stage, having a relationship with the audience, with the play, with the other people on stage, and being in. I asked Rabbi Gershenfeld, who's our wonderful, brilliant spiritual leader at Machan Yaakov, about what does it mean to be an actor? How do I understand this experience? And we kind of went through the Kabbalistic way of understanding this experience of an artist. Be in the moment. If you're a musician, if you're a performer, if you're connecting in these kinds of ways, that expression, that moment, those moments where nothing else exists except you in the zone of expressing that art, a Shakespearean soliloquy, Bach, Beethoven, painting, that is a connection with Hashem, that flow, that's, or at least that was the exciting ways of understanding it through. So
you felt, in a sense, that you were tied in on some level, on some spiritual level,
sure,
through your work.
Sure,
this is interesting.
Through especially through Shakespeare, highly emotional, expressions of humanity. I mean, we don't have to get on this whole topic. I want to say briefly that the reason, one of the why Shakespeare's complete works, because in Shakespeare's complete works exists the full spectrum of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the man's inclination towards good and man's inclination towards evil,
feel his writings capture that conflict,
that world, which is humanity encapsulated in 37 complex plays. So that's the way that I think back on Shakespeare.
Wow.
But anyway, so I felt like I had a spiritual relationship in learning and in growing in that art form, and I still feel it, and I feel it, in the audience, when I went up to the Royal Shakespeare Company over Pesach break, hadn't been to the theater in a while because of COVID, and being in yeshiva, but just sitting on the edge of my seat because I could feel what those performers were feeling.
Wow.
And yes, it was a spiritual connection. I think that most actors, if they're honest, performers, if they're honest, would express it in these kinds of terms.
If the part they were playing
Sure.
or the words they were saying
sure.
are touching on those issues.
Yeah, you can totally be be doing rote artistic work. You can totally be like, it's like, I do it because I make money for it. I make money from it. It's a job. But anyway, to answer your question, to go back, I didn't have a bar mitzvah. I was doing other things. I was performing. But yeah, Judaism was an afterthought. I think for most people, even if they have a lot of people have decent relationships with their liberal shuls, and I don't say that derogatorily, but still, after time learning, just the complete shock of the depth of the Jewish world, our learning, our thousands of years of literature, of teachers, it completely made me still frozen,
it's daunting.
It's daunting.
Yeah.
And it saddens me that most of the Jewish world doesn't see that. Because if anything, if somebody's not going to relate to their Yiddishkeit, if they're going to push it aside, or even if they believe that people may think and believe and hold that they have a beautiful relationship with their Yiddishkeit. Even so, it makes me sad that people might not know what they don't know.
Right. Right.
I imagine it makes you sad too,
Well, that's why I started this place, basically. It's to put this before as many of our Jewish brothers and sisters as possible, just to get people, because I think so much of Judaism.
Don't you just want to grab a student and just shake him? You're like, you don't know, you don't know. I don't know all the things.
Well, that could be a new approach. We could hire you to do that.
So let's not know together for about 2 years, and then I send you off to yeshiva.
Well, you recognize the difference between New York and Jerusalem. There's only so much we can do with our students here.
Do you feel limited?
I do feel limited in America. I do. I feel like sometimes I talk about Judaism here, and that's one of the powers of our heritage trip to Israel every summer, where people can actually see Judaism lived. Not that there aren't living, observant Jews in America. There are. But all the stuff we talk about, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob walked, and where the temple stood, and where the Mishkan was, if we can actually go to those places, and even just to see relics or historical archaeological evidence, that's a game changer for people. Because they see it's real. It used to be a t-shirt when I was a kid, Israel is real. And it was, this is, a little cheesy, but it really demonstrated that. Yeah. That's what's behind Birthright, and why does the Jewish community pump so much money in getting American Jews to go to Israel? If Judaism is so awesome here, then why are we spending all of our time
because they want Jewish babies, Rabbi.
Yeah. Okay. We want Jewish babies too. That's a good goal. Yeah. Jewish babies are good things.
Jewish babies, great. Where's the camera? Jewish babies, great things. Great people.
They are. They're little, but they're really awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to touch upon.
Yes.
So I was listening to your really great interview on the Orthodox Conundrum about Kiruv, which is what you do.
Outreach.
I never heard that word before until...
Some people don't like that word. Do you know that?
Why?
They think that the word kiruv, which literally means to bring somebody closer, seems to smack of like sort of Jewish evangel. Help me, how do I say the word?
Evangelism?
Evangelism.
You're proselytizing.
Like we're proselytizing.
We're
like supposed to be above that. We're too intellectual and academic for that.
Yeah.
We don't. That's for our Christian cousins, brothers and sisters. And kiruv. Now, I'll tell you the reason people are uncomfortable with the word kiruv. By the way, in my own community, and I'm not happy about this.
Yeah.
I've hired people or tried to hire people who say, I'd rather use the word Jewish outreach, Jewish engagement. Kiruv seems to imply that I'm over here and the other Jew I'm trying to makarev is down there.
Yeah.
And I need to save their soul by plucking them out of the depravity of their life and save them by bringing them to MGE. Right. So, first of all, what I tell people is that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we are bringing people closer to Judaism. We are. And that doesn't imply that the person who's bringing someone closer to Judaism is closer themselves.
Right. Yeah, Rabbi Gershenfeld, another shout out, answers this.
He's getting a lot of good plugs for
answers this question as well. People, I think he said he was asked once, are you just trying to make black hat Shabbos observant Jews? Like, no, I'm trying to help people, actualize their full potential.
Well, I think that's accurate. I think he's trying to do that.
Yeah.
I think it'll probably make them happier if they put on a hat.
Yeah, gotta have
now,
a hat.
I don't really go for the whole hat thing. I respect people who wear them, but that's not my. But
You don't think it's stylish, Rabbi?
It's very not stylish.
Oh.
I mean, it looks like it's not. I mean, it's not why people are wearing them. Especially when it starts raining and they put like the plastic on it. You've seen that? Very unattractive.
It's a gangster. It's the hats that gangsters used to wear.
Right, I know. It looks like looks like the Jewish mafia.
Wait, speaking of, I want to get back to this Kira thing. But I want to tell you something about gangsters. Okay, so
okay.
So I was learning. So on Thursday nights I learned with a couple of the Lakewood guys on Zoom.
Beautiful.
Lakewood is a very very from community in Orthodox community in New Jersey. Anyway, so are you familiar with the movie A Bronx Tale?
Oh yes, I remember. A great movie.
Okay, so I brought with my nice, good from Orthodox from birth chavruta. I brought up A Bronx Tale. I want to tell you how this happened. Okay, so we were learning. So Eliezer has the whole test for for finding finding a nice young Jewish woman. Can you help me out with the story here?
Yeah, Isaac is of marriageable age.
Yeah.
Abraham is concerned that if he doesn't meet Mrs. Right, he's not going to be able to perpetuate this new monotheism he's brought to the world. So he sends his trusted servant Eliezer to go find a shidduch, basically a soulmate for Isaac.
Right. And the big controversial thing, at least, what we were trying to learn in our Chavrusa session was whether or not the test that he gave was appropriate. Mm-hmm. To, he's going to go up to a well, and if she says you can drink from and he asks, can I drink from the well? And she says, you can drink from the well, and also your camels.
No, but I'll help you.
Yeah, I'll help you, and your camels can drink as well. So, and if that happens, then she's the one. Then she's the one. And
that's a nice criteria.
Yeah, it's a great criteria. You're trying to find a beautiful Jewish woman with giving character. Anyway, so
the Bronx Tale.
The Bronx Tale. This made me think of the Bronx Tale. This is where I brought it up. This is great. So so in A Bronx Tale, you have a big gangster who takes a young guy under his wing, and the young guy is going to go on a date, and on a first date, and the gangster, this is the 60s, so this is going to help explain the cars. The young guy is going to go on a date, and the gangster says, "Look, you're going to open the door for her to the car. She's going to get in." And if she then reaches over to the driver's side door and unlocks the door before you get to the driver's side door, she's the one. If not, forget about her.
That's a Bronx. That's great.
Yeah. And then I said, this is Torah.
That's it, man. I love it. I love it. That's adorable.
So anyway, back.
So Kiruv, outreach.
Yeah.
What was your question about it? I do believe in it and bringing Jews closer. But here's my philosophy in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You go to a good movie, you read an excellent book.
Yeah.
And you have a good friend. What do you tell your friend vis-a-vis this book or the movie? You tell him to go see the movie, go read the book. Now, if you don't tell him to go see the movie or read the book, either you don't really care about your friend so much, or you don't think it's such a good book or movie. Those are the two options. So I'm saying, my suggestion is, if you really believe in Judaism and you love it, why would you not want to share it with other people? Especially because God commands you to do that. It's in Leviticus in chapter 19 that we're supposed to share Torah with others.
Rabbi, has any student ever approached you and expressed to you that they felt that they were simply an object of MJE's attempts to kiruv?
No, we do a pretty good job with that, I must say. I've had other people who've come here. I don't want to sound too self-aggrandizing, but I've had people come to MJE from other organizations and told me that they felt like an object elsewhere. Now, I will tell you it's tricky because we are, to be fully transparent, we are trying to inspire greater observance, knowledge, and commitment in our students. We are.
Rabbi,
I tell
you're
people
an
that.
evangelizing, proselytizing.
No, so I don't think that makes I don't think that makes my students into objects. What that does is that makes me a believer of Judaism and wanting and caring enough about my students that I want to share that with them.
Yeah. I don't feel as though that I have been manipulated, in any way from my learning with you, or with the Rebbeim at MJE.
Mm-hmm.
I've grown at times. I've grown insecure and look back at moments and be like, was I being manipulated? Was I not being seen? Was it just was I on some conveyor belt
Right.
that, and if I didn't get off the conveyor belt at the time that somebody else wanted me to get off the conveyor belts, was I going to disappoint someone? That was for some reason, that was my biggest fear, was disappointing, someone that I wouldn't reach.
Right. Disappointing us?
Yeah. Disappointing you.
I mean, there was a woman that came here years ago. Very smart. I remember she was a Yale graduate. And she was coming for about 6 months, very regularly to the minyan on Shabbat, to classes during the week. And she disappeared. So I got together with her. We got together at Starbucks. And I, in a nice way, I was asking her, like, everything okay? Like, where you been? And she said, no, Rabbi, everything's fine. I just decided I'm not interested in becoming observant. I said, okay, I'm disappointed to hear that, but you didn't answer my question, where you been? And she said, I just assumed that because I'm not going to be religious, that you wouldn't want me coming around anymore. And I was like, whoa, back up the truck here. Did I ever say, did anyone on my staff ever imply even that if you weren't going to sort of become Sabbath observant or whatever, that you don't belong here anymore? She goes, no, I just assumed. And now that, I'm sharing this story because that helped me, and I share this with my whole staff a million times, that often people are thinking that.
Yeah.
But that's not really what being a rabbi and a teacher is. We have this thing called free will. People are going to make their own decisions. All we can do is get in front of people with this great wisdom and Torah and try to inspire them to study, to learn, to grow, to commit. They're going to either do it or they're not. We don't really control that. And being, and believing that we do control that is a level of arrogance, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, it turned into my own insecurity, especially when I was thinking about going off to yeshiva in that 5-day period where I made the decision to go off. Am I on that conveyor belt? Am I going to disappoint Rabbi Wildes? Am I going to disappoint, the people who are helping me go to yeshiva? I'm just going there to learn. I don't know anything about, where I want to be. I just know I'm, happy learning right now. And again, I never felt like I was being manipulated.
You know who was the best at the late and great Lubavitcher Rebbe of Schneerson? And it's in here. It's in the Tanya. He was the best at convincing an entire generation that your job is not to get somebody to become religious. Your job is to engage them Jewishly. And what they do with it is entirely their own decision.
Rabbi, this is going to be a question that we end on. We don't have to answer the question. It's a conversation I have with my best friend back from high school. Let's say somebody, he's curious about his Yiddishkeit growingly, asking questions, struggling and wrestling, which is a great place to be. Someone's wrestling.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that we ask is, look, what if I feel like I have a relationship with Hashem? And he's not telling me to, do this and don't eat that. And I feel like I go off and I have spiritual experiences, whether I'm doing an organized ayahuasca ceremony in Peru or I'm, going on these psychedelic meditations of sorts, and I feel like I'm connecting with something bigger than me, and it feels real to me, and I feel a strong internal sense to me. But he's not, and I believe that that's Hashem,
right?
And then how do you communicate with someone like that who is?
So I mean, first of all, you have to validate people's legitimate feelings, and respect them. But that's where the other rational aspect, this is coming full circle, our conversation, because you have to, I think, make a case for the authenticity of Judaism.
Yeah.
Why do we believe there's a God? And why do we believe that God is responsible for the Torah? And really desires, on whatever that means for a God, to desire us to fulfill his will and carry out his commands and bring this light of Torah into the world. That's why I think we can't throw out, as excited as we get about Kabbalah and Chassidut, we can't throw out the rational, because the rational is going to be able to enable me, even if I can't prove it, and I can't. Yeah. I don't pretend that you can prove God's existence or the divinity of the Torah, but I do believe you can make a very solid rational case, so much so that I believe it makes more sense to believe in it than it doesn't. The 51% rule, I call it. And that's what I'm arguing in my book. And that's all I think we need to make a case for, because I don't think, there is, concrete evidence, if you will. Now, there is some really good archaeology in Israel that goes way beyond 51% for a lot of the things that the Torah says and speaks about. And you'd have to really, on a purely logical and rational level, have a much better explanation than just the facts on the ground. That's the way I see it. So I think my answer to that person would be to explore from a rational perspective why Torah is true, why I think Torah is true.
You think a rational perspective would be the way for someone who's connecting to what they understand to be the divine through guided meditations?
Not necessarily, but the person you're describing is someone who's already finding spiritual relevance and it's resonating spiritually in some other kind of system.
Yeah.
So to show that, no, you can, to bring them away from that into Judaism by showing you can have the same thing with us. Mm-hmm. Why do I have to have the same thing with you? I already have it. It's fine the way I am. Why do I need to transition to some other system? Because I'm Jewish? Because my mother was Jewish? That's not good enough. I think the answer to that is because as beautiful, as wonderful of experiences and feelings you're having, they're not based on truth. They're based on a system which is not founded on... So now,
good luck.
Good luck. I'm not saying this is easy. But we do have the whole mass revelation thing, and we do have some archaeological evidence, and we do have thousands of years of Jewish tradition of a lot of really smart people believing in this kind of thing. I think we can make a very good rational case. But I'm trying to deal with the person you presented, Daniel.
Yeah, sure.
And you presented someone who's already happy spiritually, emotionally.
Fulfilled in some ways. Fulfilled at least to the extent that they believe that they...
You have to get that person to see that what's fulfilling them spiritually is not rationally based truth as Judaism is. That is not a simple task, but I think that's the way to go for that Jew.
Okay.
For a lot of other Jews, as we touched on before, what's going to excite them is not the rational. What's going to excite them is that they can have this beautiful relationship through Kabbalah and Chassidus, and they're tapping into a part of themselves and everything we discussed earlier. But for this person who already has that feeling,
Excellent. So for your listeners, I just want to thank them for joining us along on our journey, which went all over the place. And for the next time Rabbi Wildes and I and all of you meet, he is going to be finding me a wife. Boom.
Amen.
Excellent.
From your mouth. And anyone who's listening to this, if you can be helpful in that journey of finding Daniel a wife, please let us know immediately.
Excellent.